Sup, y'all? It's me, it's your boy Asmongold, and today we're going to be talking about the live Q&A session that happened today. Well, I guess it's yesterday now on Twitch TV. It was June 13th, and it was about mostly patch 6.2. Had to do with a little bit of retrospective of I guess patch 6.1, 6.0, and like WAD in general so far, and also some things going forward. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Well, I'm going to say two things. For one, this is not just going to be a recap of everything that happened, because if I talked about that, like, it would be just as long pretty much as a Q&A video. I'm going to kind of tell you guys the main points, what I found to be important, what I found to be good, what I thought was bad, etc. And I'll give you guys a link in the description, and so you guys can actually watch the Q&A yourself. It's about an hour long, so it's not really too bad. I just watched it over doing, I guess, actually some Heroes of the Storm games. But anyway, that's pretty much the main thing I wanted to say. And also, I want to say right now, too, is that I'm very positive. I'm very glad they did the Q&A. I think they answered almost all of the hard questions that people have been asking. The only question that I was disappointed that wasn't really addressed more was the fatiguing of having to go through all four of the different raid sizes, and I guess like not stepping out different raids, and like kind of whenever 6.2 comes out, pretty much people are just going to go through different iterations of Hellfire Citadel instead of going through like Heimdall to Blackrock Foundry to Hellfire Citadel. And I mean, you guys know kind of how I feel about that. I wish they'd go back to the Burning Crusade model, but I don't really want to talk about too much, I guess, like my opinions on something that wasn't even really talked about. So the first thing that they really talked about, of course, was flying, because apparently that was why they pushed back the I guess like the Q&A session. Now, I think that that's kind of convenient that also the Heroes of the Storm event happened at the same time. But either way, I have no idea if that's true or not. But they were pretty much saying that a lot of people in the development team wanted to keep flying out of the game. A lot of people didn't want to keep it out of the game. And I think like what it was is that it was kind of like what I was saying is, whenever players heard, and this is kind of how I felt really, and they thought that it kind of people like really put out a lot of negative feedback, and people who were kind of on the fence about it were like they were actually disappointed in the fact that whenever Blizzard said that there was not going to be any more flying at all, like I guess like they were talking about like the word never, and that's actually kind of what bothered me. I didn't really have a problem with not having flying in the short term, but having to look forward, not being able to look forward to like flying around the equivalent of like Storm Peaks or Ice Crown Citadel for the first time. That was kind of disappointing for me, and so I think a lot of people felt that way, which is what kind of determined, for them to add flying back. And of course, I'm very happy about that as well. Another thing that I'm very glad that they talked about was reputations. Now, the 6.0 reputations. So we're talking like Council of Exarchs, Shatari Defense. I don't even fucking remember the other. Steamworld Preservation Society, which is not really that bad. And those they also talked about that, and they basically said that the reputation sucked. They know they sucked, and everybody else knows they sucked, and they pretty much apologized for it. And then on top of that, so they're adding in these new 10 jungle reputations, and the reputations for Warlords of Draenor weren't even going to be in there to begin with, and they kind of just add them in as a last minute afterthought. And so that kind of makes sense, especially after going through all the reputations myself. Now, I'm very glad about that, because it means you're not really going to have too many more mob grinds. I think there's it's like sometimes I like to just sit down and like get, some brownies, some Mountain Dew. Actually, I hate Mountain Dew, like Doritos and like some Dr. Pepper, and sit through all night and just kill bears, right? Or whatever the equivalent of bears is for a reputation. But a lot of people don't really like to do that, and I only really like to do that maybe once every 6 months, but the rest of the time it's not really a good time for me. And so I'm really kind of glad that they were doing that, and they're going to be stepping away from that the grindy part, or at least to an extent. There's always going to be a grind, but it's not really going to be as bad. The Apexis crystals, that's kind of something that, a lot of people were disappointed about, and they were kind of pissed off about the Apexis crystals, because they're pretty much useless in 6.0, and also, all of the rewards that you get from Apexis crystals that you can buy in the vendors are pretty much outdated before you even, I guess, get enough Apexis crystals to buy them. And so, as I said before, they've kind of shifted the paradigm of Apexis crystals in 6.2 to a more amiable, and I guess like I'm happy with how Apexis crystals are in 6.2, but I think I speak for everybody almost whenever I say I'm not very happy with them, how they are in 6.0 and how they are in the game today. And Blizzard echoes that concern, and that's really one thing that I was really glad about in this whole 6.0, 6.2 thing, and the Q&A, is that they didn't really talk a whole lot about like rationalizations for doing it, and like how it should be okay, and then players didn't like it. they really kind of came out and said that, hey, this is really not how it was supposed to, like this is kind of a fuck up on our part, and we're going to try and do something better in the future. And I think 6.2 is like really kind of an indicator of that, because a lot of the different things that are, like issues right now in Warlords of Draenor, and so like we're talking about like garrison isolation, that's less of an issue in 6.2. Apexis crystal grinds, less of an issue. Lots of different things like outside of raid, like player progression, that's like a little bit less of an issue. Boring reputations. And so 6.2, like its real purpose almost is to undo everything that 6.0 and 6.1 brought to the table. And, for a lot of that stuff, I'm pretty glad. And another thing, I haven't thought about this, I didn't really, think of doing this, but I'm going to just say this right now. They also talked about the gear. If you guys don't know, you guys remember in like Burning Crusade where they had like season 1 gear or season 2 gear, let's say, is like that's basically tier 5 gear that's recolored. And so if you look at like the tier 5 gear that drops in SSC and TK, like the warrior, I think it's called the destroyer tier, and it looks fucking awesome, right? And I really wish that they would have like redone that, and I guess they kind of did with the mythic tier for BRF, and so that's probably why I'm wearing it, because it looks really, really cool. But anyway, so the season 2 gear pretty much was just a black and like brown version of the tier 5 gear. It was really just recolored. And they're going to be doing the same thing with the tier gear in Hellfire Citadel. And honestly, a lot of the Hellfire Citadel tier gear I don't really think looks that good. But like all the BRF gear and the separate PvP gear look really, really awesome in my opinion. And so I'm not really going to get too upset about it, because we do already have at least one class. I would say every class has at least one of those sets that's really cool and good looking. And the 6.2 gear doesn't look horrible, but it's really something I would have expected a lot more from it. But that's just how it goes. But yeah, so in 6.2, the Mythic Raid gear and the Elite PvP gear is going to look the exact same, basically, except for different colorations. Some people are pissed off about this. Some people are like, oh, whatever. I'm pretty much like, oh, whatever. Like, that's how it was in Burning Crusade. Like, the Vengeful gear, which is like the off-color, or I guess like other color of the season. Not season. I'm getting confused. Tier 6 gear, which is Onslaught, I think, from Black Temple, and was it? It doesn't matter. Hyjal. So it was basically just an off color of that was blue, and I really like that set. And it's one of my favorite PvP sets. And so I don't really consider this a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing, and they're just going back to it. Whenever Warlords of Draenor dropped, I think a lot of people obviously compared it to Burning Crusade, because it's basically on the same continent in a way. And so going back to the Burning Crusade roots and a lot of other things is going to pretty much make me happy, and maybe a lot of other people as well. And so what they were talking about also with like the Apexis Crystal quests is that they were kind of boring, I guess, for people who were, I'm trying to think of the word, like people just walk over there and you just break boxes and kill guys, and maybe you kill a tank or something like that, and then you're done. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. And hopefully they're going to bring back some more daily quests in 6.2, and probably in the future as well, to kind of give them more, a reason for why you're killing those tanks and breaking the boxes. And so I'm kind of glad about that. And so we'll see how that goes. Another thing I do wish that they talked about a little bit more, but they did talk about a lot, is Garrisons isolating players. And as I said before, in 6.2, there's going to be a really big, what's the word for it? Like hub in 6.2 that players are going to all go to, and you're going to be able to see other people, and there's going to be a ton of people there because it's very small, and so there's going to be a lot of people there, and I think it's going to be a good thing. And so that's going to be one way that they're going to, I guess, like get people out of the garrison. I do wish they'd like put a command table in there so people didn't feel like they had to go back and forth to send their followers off on missions. But I guess you'd have to do it for your shipyard anyway, so that's just how it is. Anyway, another thing is that the professions, they kind of did acknowledge also the professions were because basically there was not really a lot of reasons for people to go out into the world, and they also said that pretty much like not going out into the world and not having those like out of garrison, like open world incentives to go around and do stuff was a really bad thing, especially for an MMO and for WoW. And so hopefully they're going to move back, and they said that they will, and so we'll see if this happens. Move back to creating more incentives in the open world. They did that a little bit with 6.1. Looked like the Harrison Jones quests, and I think they're like bounty quests too. I've never even done one of those, but that's what I hear. And so they're going to be moving away from, I guess, like the professions the way they are now. And a lot of people, I don't think I know anybody who likes the professions how they are now. And so they're probably going to be changing that as well. The epic gems that they're releasing on 6.2 are incredibly expensive. Like they're probably going to be like 30,000 gold each at the beginning. And so, I guess that's going to be one thing. I would personally prefer if they went back to the Burning Crusade style of professions, where professions can create like a lot of really, really great raid gear, but sometimes the materials drop in the raids that you can buy, and like they're BOP or BOE. Oh, they were BOP and then changed into BOE, and so that's like a confusing thing. But basically, where you could actually create like pretty much like raid gear with your professions, and while you can do that now, it's not really the same as it was, and I just wish that they'd do that as well. And so I was really glad about that, especially the professions thing, because you guys know I've been pretty disappointed about the professions, and also having like those like really, really big incentives to stay in your garrison and do all this stuff in your garrison. And when that's incentivized so much, people don't really go out in the world, and that's disincentivized a lot of other things inadvertently. And so, like going out and farming herbs, no real reason to do that because you can just sit in your garrison and log on to your other characters. And that's another thing that they talked about was like alts. And one thing that they're going to be doing is I think this is good, not necessarily for me, but I consider this probably a good thing for the game, is that they're going to try and add some sort of diminishing returns. If you have like a bunch of different characters with like garrisons, and you have like full, treasure finder characters and all those treasure finder followers and all those characters, and they're going to add some sort of diminishing returns for how much gold you get out of those garrison missions for the treasure finder past your, I guess, probably your main. And so while obviously that sucks for me and a lot of other people, I'm not really surprised that they're doing it because it's just adding so much gold into the economy, and it's flat gold without any real, I guess, like items to be added in for that to offset and create, I guess, like things for that gold to buy. And so I'm kind of glad about that in terms of like the greater scope of the game. But in terms of me, kind of sucks because I make a lot of money just sitting there clicking missions. And so they also kind of like they want to kind of think that alts are not really there to advance your main character. They're really kind of there like, so like if I'm a warrior, like if I want to try out healing, it's there for me to try out healing, not for me to create this healer character that can like maybe go get bags from the heroics and then sell them or get them, I don't know, like send them to my warrior. And that's not really what the intention of having the alts is for. Not really having the alts, but like kind of creating an incentive for doing that. They don't really want to have that, and I think that's kind of a good thing. But at the same time, if you're going to do that, I think they really need to create more like main character content. 10 and Jungle is going to bring a lot of that, but I would say a semi-casual, like me playing in high school, like whenever I like had to go to bed before 2 in the morning, I would say it would take me probably like a month and a half to 2 months to clear out all of the in-game or like out of raid in-game content in 10 and Jungle, and even now would be a stretch because I would play all day on weekends. And so that's kind of a good thing, kind of a bad thing. Of course, like having the alts that can help your main is more of an incentive to create those alts, but at the same time, I think that it would be better if the alts were kind of there for themselves instead of just as like kind of a means to an end. And so that's kind of good. They also talked about rating and I guess like mythic rating. A lot of people have complained about like how mythic rating is 20 man only. And for me personally, I don't really consider that a bad thing. They've always had locked raid sizes. Back in vanilla, there was 20 mans and 40 mans. And what was it? In Burning Crusade, there was 10 mans, and all the real raids really were 25 mans. And Wrath of the Lich King, they did 10 and 25, and they've pretty much gone that route all the way. And maybe if what I would really like to see, honestly, is like maybe a 10-man version that was mythic, but it just dropped shittier loot, or maybe it just like never dropped Warforged gear, and the 20-man always dropped Warforged gear, or something like that. But some sort of a serious, small group progression. Same as like ICC 10 Heroic was. It was like really hard to actually kill Heroic Lich King even on 10-man, and if they could do that, I would be really happy because it would allow me to kind of go in there as like, maybe people who aren't like, serious people in my guild, or maybe at the start as like an alternate form of progression we could do on the weekends. Pretty much what I'm getting at here is I think it would be cool if they added 10-man Mythic back into the game, or not back into the game, but into the game, in a place like kind of how 10-man was in Wrath. Next thing they talked about was the fight length and how some fights on Mythic can just go on and on and on. And they use like Imperator Margok for an example. I think that fight can go up to like 20 minutes or something like that. And while it is fucking epic, you finally kill this boss. You've been like literally fighting for 20 minutes. And Heroic Ragnaros was even longer than that. It's crazy awesome, but like realistically, it's just too long. And to have like 20 people coordinated at that type of level for 20 minutes, and assume like no disconnects, no mistakes, etc. It can be extremely frustrating, and it breaks down a lot of guilds. And the next thing that they talked about was, I guess, like the raid itemization. And the reason for that is like a lot of people have had questions about that because I guess like some of the different classes don't really have a 735 weapon that drops off of Archimon. And if you guys didn't know, like Hellfire Citadel, the item will start, I think it's like at Mythic at like 725, and then at the end of the instance, the Archimon drops 735, and so it's kind of to incentivize not skipping the last boss, like what a lot of people did, and Heimall that they didn't really want people to do is like just skip Imperator Margok on I guess like on normal mode and just go straight to heroic, like Mythic or heroic Kargath or the Butcher or something like that, because it's just a lot easier than normal Margok, and they didn't really want people to do that, and so they wanted to tier out, I guess, like the drops to where it was more rewarding for killing a boss later on in the instance, and people didn't really see a bunch of like gear go to disenchant. And I think that's a good thing. In some ways, it's not really a good thing, but we'll kind of see how it plays out. I don't think they've really done this in any real regard, besides like just maybe the last couple bosses dropping higher level gear. And so we'll see what happens. I don't really know what's going to happen, but yeah, that was intended, and they don't honestly, like, people they hear the concerns of people who don't really have a 735 weapon, and they just don't care. And I think that kind of sucks, but that's just how it is. And hey. And the next thing they also talked about was time walking, and they kind of didn't really talk about it too much, but basically they said it was more or less for alts, and that people can run it over and over and over. It's kind of like a replacement for LFR, and it's just kind of a fun thing to do. They didn't really talk about time walking raids. I think they said it in Blue Post before that it might happen, it probably will happen at some point or another, but we'll kind of see. And I guess like the next thing, really the last thing, honestly, is I guess like a lot of people's concerns with the classes, especially like demonology, because they pretty much said that they wanted to just nerf demonology so people would play the other two specs like Affliction and Destro, and so a lot of demonology warlocks are pretty pissed off about that. But I can see kind of why, to get people to like switch around and not just play the same thing every single time. But there are other classes that don't really have that issue as much, and so I can see why a lot of people are pissed off. But I can also understand the reasoning for like, I guess, like wanting the pendulum to swing back and forth, so people aren't just continuously playing the same thing, every tier. And so that kind of sucks. But I think that's happened to for Warriors. I think like in just 6.0 and 6.1, the best Warrior spec changed like 5 times, and so that was really frustrating for me. But having it be once a tier isn't really too bad. That's usually how it goes. Like one tier, like Arms is really good. The next tier, Fury, is really good, and then it just goes back and forth. Cataclysm was like that. Tier 11 was Arms, Tier 12 was Fury, and then Tier 13 was back to Arms. And while the other one was competitive in a way, it really just wasn't going to give you the highest numbers. And so anyway, guys, as I said before, I was really kind of glad about like this whole, the Q&A session and everything else, because I mean, a lot of people have been really kind of worried about the communication, and they didn't really know like what was going on because they didn't really do any of these, and they haven't been really talking to people on the forums as much. And so I was really glad that they kind of came out and did this Q&A and answered a lot of people's real questions, and not just the the easy questions, but they answered the hard ones too. And hopefully we'll get some sort of a reasoning of like, I don't know, because 4 difficulties it really does seem like too much, and I would really like to see that addressed more. But we'll see what happens. And they were also going to do, I guess, like a follow-up Q&A with like Holinka, who's like one of the main PvP designers, and because this mostly had to deal with PvE, but with PvP. They're going to do, I guess, like a follow-up Q&A. I don't know if it's going to be a live Q&A or just like maybe he might answer some questions. But that's what Lore, who's like the guy conducting the interview, said. And so we'll see what happens. But anyway, I'm hopeful. I'm glad, if for nothing else, that it was an attempt to communicate with the players. And I would say that it worked pretty well, considering they answered the questions that at least I was concerned about. And so anyway, guys, I'll go ahead and link the Q&A again down below in the description, as you guys can check it out yourselves. But other than that, that's pretty much all I've got. So thanks for watching, and like, comment, subscribe.